Now remember the video said to circle the base, run the race. So our base in this case is the x, and we're going to run the race across the equal sign to the 1/4. So then that means we're going to write x to the 1/4 power, and that it equals whatever's left over. All right, so we're trying to get the x by itself, so we want to get rid of that 1/4 power, and so what we can do is multiply by the reciprocal. Now remember, when we do that, though, it has to stay an exponent. And I'm going to multiply the radical 5 also by the 4/1 power. Now let's just take this because that looks really kind of gross. So remember, a square root is really just 5 to the 1/2 power, and then we're going to raise that to the 4th power. Okay. All right, so then obviously on the left, our exponents are going to disappear, and I'm left with x. And then on the right-hand side here, I'm left with 5. Now, 1/2 times 4, because remember, power to a power we multiply, is 2. And that's how we get 25. So let's start by circling the base, running the race, and now from here we're going to set it up in exponential form. So we're going to have x to the 2/3 power, and that's going to equal 64. Just like in number 1, we want to get rid of that exponent of 2/3, so we're going to multiply by the reciprocal, which is 3/2. That will cancel out the exponents on the left-hand side of the equation. So it's going to give me x equals. Now here I'm going to do power over root. So it's the square root of 64 to the 3rd power. Well, I know that the square root of 64 is 8, and then I'm going to raise that to the 3rd power, and that's going to give me 512. Circle the base, run the race. We're going to end up with 3 to the -2nd power equals x. Well, that's pretty easy because we don't need to move anything. But remember, when we have an exponent that's negative, we can make it positive by dropping it to the denominator in this case. Okay? Because currently 3 to the -2nd power is in the numerator, so we drop it down to the denominator to make it positive. So then 1/9 equals x. Circle the base, run the race. So when we write that, we're going to get 81 to the 1/2 power equals x. Now remember, anything to a 1/2 power is really just the square root. So that's really the square root of 81, and we know that the square root of 81 is 9. Let's circle the base, run the race again, and we are going to end up getting x to the -3/2 power equals 125. All right, so now with this one, we need to multiply by the reciprocal. But remember, again, it's an exponent, okay, which is going to cross out the exponents on the left-hand side of the equal sign, which is what we want. We want to get x by itself. All right, now, x to the -2/3. Again, we can make an exponent positive if we drop its position. So currently it was in the numerator. Now you can see I dropped it to the denominator. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is power over root. So my root is 3, my power is 2. So I am going to do the cube root of 125, and then I'm going to square that answer. All right, well, the cube root of 125 is 5, and then I'm going to square that answer, which is going to give me 1/25. Circle the base, run the race. we are going to get x to the negative third power equals 8. Now we want to get rid of that negative third power, so we're going to multiply by the reciprocal, which is negative 1/3, which means I have to do the same to the right side of the equal sign, and that will cross out our exponents on the left-hand side. All right, so just like in the previous one, if we want to get rid of the negative exponent, we have to drop it, in this case, to its opposite position. So right now it's in the numerator, so we're going to make that in the denominator. Okay, now remember, we have power over root. So this is the cube root of 8, and then raised to the first power, which, you know, we don't really have to write that first power, but so this is 1 over, technically, the cube root of 8. And we know that the cube root of 8 is 2, so the answer is 1/2. All right, well, this one starts out the same, but this is going to be a little more fun because look at our base there. Circle the base, run the race. That base is a binomial, which we really haven't seen something like this, but not a big deal. So we're going to have x plus 4, that quantity squared, equals 17x minus 4. All right, so just remember, when a quantity is squared, that means let's rewrite that thing twice. And then what we're going to end up having to do is we're going to double distribute. So when I double distribute, I'm going to get x squared plus 4x plus 4x plus 16 equals 17x minus 4. All right, well, I'm going to move that 17x over, and I'm going to add that 4 over as well. So I get everything set equal to 0, because I see that I have a quadratic, and I'm probably going to have to factor. So that's going to give me x squared minus 9x plus 20 equals 0. Okay, so let's keep going with that. That's going to be x minus 5 and x minus 4 equals 0. We do our little t-chart, and I end up with x equals 5 and x equals 4. Okay, now one thing you just want to check with these two answers here. You just want to make sure that when you take either of these answers and we plug it back into this base here, we don't want to end up getting a negative base, or we don't want to end up getting 0. So if I plug in a 5 here, 5 plus 4 is 9, that's fine. Okay, so we want anything bigger than 0. If I plug in 4 here, 4 plus 4 is 8, that's also fine because that's positive. Okay, so we don't want to get 0 and we don't want to get a negative number. If we did get 0 or a negative number, we would just reject that answer. Negative 1/3 here. So I'm going to circle the base, run the race, and we can see we're getting a little more excited here with these kinds of questions. So kind of like number 7, we have a binomial squared. And this time it's going to be equal to a fraction. Well, that's going to be fun. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite this. Actually, I'm just going to draw a little arrow here as x plus 3 and x plus 3. Okay? All right, so when I double distribute that, I'm going to get x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals x cubed plus x minus 2 over x. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cross multiply. I just think that that's kind of the easier way to go here. So if I cross multiply this way, I'm going to get x cubed. Let's make that look like an x. X cubed plus 6x squared plus 9x equals x cubed plus x minus 2. Well, I can see that my x cubes are going to cancel out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move over the x, and I'm going to move over the 2. Okay, because again, it's a quadratic, and so I'm probably going to end up maybe having to do some kind of factoring here. Okay, so I end up with 6x squared plus 8x plus 2 equals 0. Well, I see that I have 2 as a factor, so I can divide that out. and that's going to give me 3x squared plus 4x plus 1 equals 0. All right, so now at this point I am going to rainbow. So copy down my first term, copy down my last term, and what adds to 4 and multiplies to 3. So that would be a positive 3x and a positive 1x. Right? Okay, group and group. So I can take a 3x out of here. Oh my goodness, I don't know what's with those x's, sorry. And I get x plus 1. And here I'm just going to take out a 1, and I get x plus 1. All right, let's bring this up over here. I'm going to try to squeeze it in. So I have 3x plus 1, and I have x plus 1 equals 0. Okay, so let's do my t-chart here. So I have 3x plus 1 equals 0, and I have over here, I can just kind of do my little cheater method. There's x equals negative 1. Here I'm going to subtract 1, subtract 1. So that's going to be 3x equals negative 1, and then divide out my 3, and that's going to be x equals negative 1/3. Now again, you just want to do a quick check here. So you want to do a quick check. So if I have this negative 1/3 here, I just want to plug it in here and make sure that I don't get 0 and I don't get a negative number, which I don't, so we're good. Same thing with x equals negative 1. Let's plug that in here, and you can see that I still get a positive number, so we're good to go. All right, so let's circle the base, run the race. And then we are going to get x plus 1, that quantity to the 3rd power, equals 64. Okay, so I can multiply this by its reciprocal exponent to get rid of that 3rd, which should be 1/3. 1/3. So that will cross out the exponents on the left. And so then on the left, I'm going to be left with x plus 1 equals. And remember, 1/3 power really is just the cube root of 64. So that's x plus 1 equals 4. So x equals 3. All right, last one. Circle the base, run the race. So I think let's write 5x minus 1, that quantity to the 1/3 power, equals 4. And let's get rid of that exponent. So we're going to multiply by its reciprocal, which is 3 over 1, or just 3, right? And that's going to get rid of my exponent there on the left-hand side of the equal sign. So I'll get 5x minus 1 equals 4 to the 3rd, which is 64. And let's add the 1, which is going to give me 65, right? Divide out that 5, and I will get x equals 13.